Hello and welcome to Education in Focus, powered by Chalkboard News. I'm Dan McCaleb, Vice President of News and Content at the Franklin News Foundation, which publishes chalkboardnews.com. Chalkboard is a news website dedicated to issues related to K-12 education. Joining me today, as he does each and every week, is Chalkboard's K-12 editor, Brendan Clary. How are you, Brendan?
I'm doing pretty well, Dan. Trying to stay warm here. How about you?
Yeah, we have, you're in the Detroit area and I'm in the Chicago area, and we're recording this, by the way, on Monday, January 8th, and we have a snowstorm coming tonight and into tomorrow. I don't know about you guys, bro.
I don't know. Yeah, I haven't looked at the weather, but I think we're expected to get some stuff, so.
All right. Well, stay safe out there, listeners. Brendan, Chicago Public Schools is considering ending its contract with the Chicago Police Department and removing school resource officers from buildings throughout the city. A vote could come as soon as this month, as you've reported at chalkboardnews.com. What's going on here? Why are they doing this?
Yeah, so a spokesperson from the Chicago Public Schools, they confirmed with me that the Chicago Board of Education has been, quote, reviewing the district's approach to whole school safety for all CPS schools. And I looked into this after several reports came out that principals were being told, like, you should expect not having any school resource officers next year. So they were told that in meetings, and that was covered by some local media in the Chicago area. So essentially, this is a broader push. Since 2020 or so, there's been some calls to lower the police presence in schools.
And that's directly related, I assume, to the defund the police movement after.
Yes. And the calls for racial justice in 2020, that is where some of this is stemming from, that there's 2020, 2021, 2022, there's been different plans that the Chicago Public Schools has created called the Whole School Safety Program. In 2021, the Chicago Public School created the Whole School Safety Programs, which basically says schools can opt in to voting for these school resource officers if they want to, but if they don't, they get some money back for alternative safety strategies, is what they call it. So I think that could be metal detectors, or that could be maybe social emotional learning. I'm not exactly sure what the tools are there, but if a school votes, there's like a committee that's created from the plan. And if you vote not to, then you get $3.7 million for your school to invest toward these alternative strategies. So that's been what's going on. But now there's sort of this question of whether the board is going to sort of hand down, that there will be no school resource officers as of the 2024-2025 school year. So that's the latest thing. And I think it's yet to be seen what's going to come up at that board meeting later this month. I believe it's January 25th is that next scheduled board meeting. But, that is kind of an open question there of, will there be school resource officers left there? Because of this, there's a broader push there in Chicago to sort of step back from school resource officers and to provide those things. And so that approach that they point to is, what they call wraparound supports. I think, that's different funding or different like mental health services, restorative justice, which I've written about a lot. Usually that's, having a circle where people can talk about, what's going on in their lives and different stressors. And they also focus on healing-centered practices, re-engagement strategies, facility needs, and then they also do mention that, there are times for school resource officers. So they're looking at that thing. That's what they confirmed with me. They haven't said anything else publicly about that, but some of that reporting about, principals being on a call with higher ups and hearing that there's going to be some action taken, and that, it could lead to that there would be no school resource officers in the coming school year.
So we're using the term school resource officers, and that probably means many things to many different people. But these are police officers in Chicago, so these are actual police officers. So even if they're doing other types of things with students, non-police officer type things, they're police officers that are in the buildings,
right? And they're contracted from the Chicago
Police Department, right? So is it like, what about, is public safety part of the conversation, school safety part of the conversation when it comes to eliminating these school resource officers, which are also police officers? I don't know how much you read the headlines about Chicago violence and crime and whatnot. It's not the safest place in the world.
Right. Well, I think that is a hard balance to strike, because I think that you do have some of these administrators who are saying they recognize that there might be a need for, and I think some of the administrators that talk to local news outlets and that were on the record as saying, this is, they basically said that, like, we have to be, considerate, like this, our school is known as a safe school. and parents send their kids here because, despite all of the different, crime statistics that are outside the school, this is known as a safe place for students to be. So if we remove school resource officers, the police officers from the building, we're messing with that equation. And so I think that that's a good point. But you do have sort of a push, I think, from the top, like from Mayor Brandon Johnson, and, some of the school board members toward equitable practices and towards different, focuses on the racial justice or equity sort of equation. And basically, I think that the argument is if you have police officers in schools, then you're having sort of these maybe highly charged conflicts with students, and that encourages the student to prison pipeline. That's something that is discussed in these kinds of conversations, that people are worried about, interactions with police at a young age. And if it disproportionately affects people of color, then that is encouraging them, to go to a prison or to have run-ins with the law because the law is in their school building. So I think that, it gets very complicated very quickly. I think that there's, a lot of different facets to this, but, you do have principals pushing back and saying, this doesn't really make sense, especially if we're not able to even vote on it. Like if we're getting kind of a top-down mandate, that is distressing to some of the administrators that have spoken to the media about this and have been outspoken in the fact that they want to have school resource officers. They want to have police in their buildings to protect students and, to help kind of curb, maybe some violence or things like that in the schools, right, Dan?
Well, I hope they do have a good plan if they do end up replacing or eliminating the school resource officers. I see the potential for some unintended consequences here, Brendan. I know you'll continue to follow the story at chalkboardnews.com, where, of course, our listeners can also follow the story, but we are out of time. For Brendan Clary, I'm Dan McCaleb. Please subscribe. Thank you for listening.
Knowledge is power, and you deserve to know what happens in your state government. That's why the Center Square's reporting zeroes in on state authorities publishing stories that show where your money goes and who spends it. The Center Square gives power to the taxpayer by tracking politicians' use of the people's money and demanding transparency from state-run agencies. This is how the Center Square equips you, the American taxpayer, to hold your state government accountable. Sign up now for your state's Center Square newsletter at thecentersquare.com.